I thought the day my brother announced his engagement would be the moment I finally mattered to my family. It turned out to be the day I stopped being afraid of them. It was a Sunday in late April, the kind of Savannah afternoon that smells like wisteria and warm asphalt, when my mother called to tell me the news. Derek had proposed to his girlfriend of 4 months, a woman named Brittany, whom I had met exactly twice, and the whole family was gathering at my parents' house on Habersham Street to celebrate. I was still in my scrubs. I'd just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital, and had exactly 43 days until my nurse practitioner licensing exam, the test I'd spent 2 years, and $60,000 working toward. I was exhausted. I was behind on my practice questions, and I had a study session scheduled for that evening with my classmate Jordan. But when my mother said come home, I came home. That's what I'd always done. My parents' house was full of noise when I arrived. Relatives I hadn't seen in a year crowding the living room. Someone's kids running through the hallway. My father grilling on the back patio with his college friends. Derek and Brittany sat at the center of it all like royalty receiving court, Brittany's ring catching the light every time she raised her hand, which was often. My mother floated between guests with a platter of cheese and a smile so wide it looked like it hurt. I stood in the doorway for a moment, and nobody noticed I'd arrived. I got myself a drink from the kitchen, found a quiet corner near the back window, and watched my brother accept congratulations from people who had barely spoken to me since Christmas. Derek was 30 years old and had been, in the generous phrasing my mother used, between opportunities for the better part of 3 years. He'd quit his sales job in Atlanta, moved back to Savannah, taken up some vague consulting work that he described differently every time someone asked, and my parents had been covering his car payment, his phone bill, and a portion of his rent in the apartment he shared with Brittany since the previous October. I had never once asked my parents for money, not since I was 22. I'd taken out loans for nursing school, worked nights at an urgent care clinic while finishing my bachelor's degree, and when I enrolled in the No Problem program 2 years ago, I had done it on a combination of federal loans and a merit scholarship that covered exactly half of my tuition. The other half I paid myself, working extra shifts, picking up per diems at a clinic across town, eating a lot of rice and canned soup and telling myself it would matter eventually. It would matter when I had my license, when I had my own practice someday, when I could write my own name on a prescription pad. 43 days. My mother finally spotted me across the room and waved me over with the kind of impatient urgency she reserved for people she needed something from. I crossed the room and she gripped my arm before I could speak. "I need to talk to you about the wedding," she said, though the wedding had been announced approximately 90 minutes ago. "They haven't even set a date yet." "September," she said. "Derek wants September, which means we have 5 months, Maya. 5 months to put together a proper event, and Brittany's family isn't," she lowered her voice. "Well, they're not going to be much help financially, so it's going to fall on us." I looked at her. "Mom, I have my boards in 43 days. She blinked at me with the expression she'd worn my entire life when I said something she'd decided not to hear. "You'll be done with that by June. The wedding is in September." "Right, but the planning would start now, Maya." Her voice shifted into the tone I'd grown up being afraid of, the one that implied I was being deliberately difficult. "Your brother is getting married. This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment for this family. I need you to be the maid of honor. I need you to help coordinate vendors. And I need you to not make this about yourself for 5 minutes." I opened my mouth. I closed it. Across the room, my father raised a beer in Derek's direction, and they laughed about something I couldn't hear. I went home that night and told myself I'd figure it out. I could study and help plan a wedding. Other people managed harder things. I was just being sensitive. I almost believed it. The calls started the next morning. My mother, wanting me to tour a venue on Thursday. Brittany, needing my opinion on centerpieces. My father, with a simple text. "Your mother needs you to be more present for this. Your brother's happiness matters too." I let 3 of them go to voicemail. The 4th was my mother calling from the venue parking lot to tell me the coordinator had a cancellation and I needed to come right now if we wanted to lock in the date. I was in the middle of a practice exam. I'd blocked out 6 hours for it. I had gotten through 40 questions of 200. I went to the venue. That is how the next 3 weeks went. I studied in stolen hours, between the florist consultation and the cake tasting, between the engagement party planning and the rehearsal dinner venue research. My mother decided we needed to book immediately before anything good was taken. I was sleeping 5 hours a night. I was falling behind. Jordan texted me twice to ask if I was okay, and I told her I was fine, which was the same lie I'd been telling people for approximately 25 years. The night everything changed started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. It was my Aunt Carol, my mother's older sister, calling from Charleston, where she owned a medical billing consulting firm that had, by my estimation, made her fairly comfortable over the years. My Aunt Carol and my mother had a relationship that I would describe as peacefully cold. They were polite at holidays. They did not discuss money or parenting. They had not, to my knowledge, had a real conversation in several years. My Aunt Carol called me directly, which she did maybe twice a year, usually on my birthday. "I need to ask you something," she said, before I could even say hello properly, "and I need you to be completely honest with me." I sat down on my kitchen floor. Something in her voice made me sit down. "Did your mother tell you about the arrangement we have?" "What arrangement?" A pause. Long enough that I could hear her breathing. "Maya," she said carefully, "for the past 3 years, I have been sending your mother $2,000 a month. She told me it was going directly into an account she'd set up for your No Problem program, a supplement to help you cover what your scholarship didn't. She called it your education fund." The kitchen was very quiet. "I didn't know that," I said. "You didn't know," my Aunt Carol repeated, and her voice had gone completely flat. "You didn't know because she never told you." "I've been paying my own tuition," I said. "I have the loan statements. I've been covering the gap myself. I've been working extra shifts for 2 years too." "Maya," my Aunt Carol's voice cracked, just slightly, "I've sent your mother $72,000. I don't remember the rest of that conversation very clearly. I remember the number. I remember sitting on my kitchen floor after we hung up and looking at my study materials spread across the coffee table, at the stack of practice question books I'd bought used to save money, at the meal prep containers in my fridge from Sunday, when I'd cooked 5 days of lunches at once, because buying lunch near the hospital was $12 I didn't want to spend. $72,000. My Aunt Carol had been sending my mother $2,000 a month for 3 years, believing it was going to help me get my license, and I had been working myself to collapse, paying my own way, and nobody had said a word. I didn't sleep that night. I told myself I needed more information before I did anything, that maybe there was an explanation, that maybe my mother had opened an account somewhere and just not told me, that maybe there was a misunderstanding. I sat with my practice questions open in front of me and read the same paragraph about pharmacokinetics 11 times without absorbing a single word. In the morning, I drove to my parents' house before anyone was awake. I had a key. I'd had a key since I was 17. I let myself in quietly, went to my father's office, and opened the filing cabinet where he kept household documents. He had organized it the same way my entire life, alphabetical, color-coded, meticulous about paperwork in a way he was meticulous about very little else. It took me 12 minutes to find what I was looking for. There was a folder labeled simply C. W., my Aunt Carol's initials. Inside were 36 bank statements, 2 years of them, showing regular deposits of $2,000 into my parents' joint checking account. Not a separate savings account, not anything earmarked for me. Their joint checking account, where the mortgage payment came out, where my mother's car payment came out, where Derek's car payment came out. Because yes, I found that statement too, and I sat on my father's office floor and looked at it for a long time. There was more. Behind the bank statements was a document I recognized the shape of before I recognized what it was. A loan agreement. My parents' home equity line of credit, taken out 18 months ago. I scanned down to the co-signer line and felt the floor tilt. My name, my signature, except I had never signed anything. I had never agreed to co-sign a loan on my parents' house. I had never been asked. I would have remembered being asked, because I would have said no. And I would have said no because I knew what my parents' finances looked like, and co-signing anything attached to them would have been financial self-destruction. The loan was for $35,000. I photographed everything, every statement, the loan agreement, both sides. I put the folder back exactly where I'd found it. I let myself out quietly. I called my Aunt Carol from the parking lot 2 blocks away, with my hands shaking so badly I dropped my phone twice. "I found it," I said when she picked up. "I found where the money went. And there's something else you need to know." She arrived in Savannah by 3 o'clock that afternoon. My Aunt Carol was 58 years old, and she had the kind of energy that made rooms rearrange themselves around her. She was not tall or dramatic, or especially loud. She was simply precise in a way that made you feel that things happening in her presence would be handled. She sat across from me at my kitchen table, looked at the photographs I'd taken, and said nothing for almost 4 minutes. "The loan," she said finally. "I never signed it. That's not my signature." She turned the photograph toward herself and studied it again. "Did you tell them you know?" "Not yet." "Good." She set the photograph down. "I'm going to call my attorney tonight. And you're not going to say a word to your parents until we know exactly what we're dealing with." "My aunt," I started, and she looked at me. "This is identity theft, Maya. This is wire fraud. What your mother did with the money I sent is one thing. That's between her and me, and she will answer for it. But this," she tapped the loan agreement. "Someone signed your name to a legal financial document without your knowledge or consent. That is a federal crime." I had known, in some part of myself, since the moment I'd found the document, but hearing it said out loud in my aunt's flat, factual voice made it real in a way that was almost physical. "They're my parents," I said. "I know," my Aunt Carol said, not unkindly. "I know they are." We agreed I would continue as normal for the next few days while she consulted with her attorney, and I gathered any additional documentation I could find. I would still go to the venue walkthrough on Friday. I would still answer my mother's texts about seating arrangements. I would not let them know what I had found. It was the longest week of my life. I was sitting in a coffee shop near the hospital on Wednesday afternoon, my practice questions open on my laptop, when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Coordinator needs final head count by tomorrow. Also, Brittany wants to know if you can pick up the fabric samples from the bridal shop on your way to work Thursday. They close at 6. I stared at my screen. 31 days until my boards. I typed back, "I can't Thursday. I have a study group." I put my phone face down and went back to my questions. She called 11 minutes later. "You have a study group," she repeated, and her voice had the particular quality it got when she was working up to something. "I have my licensing exam in 31 days, Mom. And Brittany needs those fabric samples. Then Brittany can pick them up herself." The silence was long. "I don't know what has gotten into you lately," my mother said. "You have been difficult since this engagement was announced, and I need you to check your attitude. Your brother is." "Mom." I was surprised by how steady my voice was. "I love Derek. I'm happy for Derek. But I've been to 4 vendor appointments in 3 weeks, and I'm falling behind on the most important exam of my career. I can't pick up fabric samples on Thursday." She hung up. My father called 20 minutes later to tell me I was stressing my mother out, and that I needed to remember what was important to this family. I let it go to voicemail. My brother texted to ask if everything was okay because apparently he'd heard I was being difficult, and I wrote back, "Everything is fine. I'm just studying." That Friday, my Aunt Carol drove back to Savannah. She arrived at my apartment with her attorney on the phone and a file folder of her own, and she sat down and told me what they had found. My mother had indeed deposited all $72,000 into the joint checking account. 41,000 of it had been spent on household expenses and Derek's supplementary costs over the same 3-year period. 9,000 had gone, in a series of cash withdrawals, toward what my Aunt Carol's attorney suspected were deposits on wedding vendors that had been paid with no written agreement or receipt. 12,000 had been transferred to a joint account my parents held with Derek, which his attorney gently noted was unusual. The remaining 10,000 appeared to have been spent on my mother's personal credit card, which showed charges at clothing boutiques, a spa, and several expensive restaurant meals over 18 months. "She told me it was for you," my Aunt Carol said quietly. "Every time I sent it, she thanked me for supporting your future. She sent me a card at Christmas that said you were thriving because of the help." The forged signature on the home equity loan had been sent to my Aunt Carol's attorney, who forwarded it to a forensic documents expert she used for business fraud cases. The expert's preliminary opinion was that the signature was a deliberate forgery, not an accident or a similar-looking signature, but a traced attempt at replicating my handwriting. "Who would have access to a sample of your signature?" my Aunt Carol's attorney asked. I thought about it. Any document I'd ever signed at home, financial aid forms I filled out during high school, insurance paperwork. "So your parents would have had access?" "Yes." Then we move forward. My Aunt Carol gave my parents the same courtesy my uncle had given his brother in a story I would not know for months, yet one final chance to do the right thing quietly. She drove to Habersham Street on a Saturday morning while I waited at my apartment. She came back 2 hours later looking neither surprised nor upset, just very composed in the way that people get when they've confirmed something they already suspected. Your mother said the money was a gift that was always meant for the household, my Aunt Carol told me. Your father said he'd had a lawyer look at the home equity loan and there was no problem with the cosigner. When I showed him the forensic opinion, he asked me to leave. So they're not going to settle. Your mother also said, my Aunt Carol paused. She said you've been ungrateful your entire life and that Derek deserved this opportunity because he had struggled more than you. I looked at my kitchen table, at my practice question booklet with the coffee stain on the cover, at my work schedule tacked to the fridge, the extra shifts highlighted in yellow. What do we do now? I asked. Now, my Aunt Carol said, I make some phone calls. The posts appeared on a Tuesday. 3 days later, my mother first. A long public Facebook post about financial abuse within families, about adult children who manipulate older relatives against their parents, about the heartbreak of watching a daughter you sacrificed everything for turn on you at the worst possible time. She did not name me. She did not have to. The comments from church friends and neighbors came in within hours, people who had known my family for decades lining up to express their shock and sympathy. My father shared it with a paragraph of his own about ungrateful children and the pain of betrayal. My brother posted a photo of himself and Brittany with a caption about keeping toxicity out of the wedding planning, which made people ask questions in the comments that he was happy to answer vaguely. My coworker Simone texted me a screenshot before noon. Is this about you? I called my Aunt Carol, who had already seen it. Don't respond, she said immediately. Not a word publicly. Screenshot everything. Document every post, every comment, every share. Forward them all to my attorney. People think I'm abusing them. People who don't know you think they're abusing your parents. People who actually know you are being conspicuously quiet. She paused. I already had 2 of your mother's oldest friends text me to ask what was really going on. They've known Linda for 40 years. They're not posting supportive comments. She was right. I scrolled through the comments with a sick feeling and noticed that every name I recognized, every person from my actual life, my college friends, my coworkers, my father's business contacts who knew me by name, none of them were there. The sympathy was from acquaintances, from people who knew my parents the way you know neighbors, a wave and a smile and whatever story they chose to tell. Noah came over that night and sat with me while I cried, which I had not done in front of anyone since I was probably 19. He didn't try to fix it. He just sat there, which was the right thing. Are you going to be okay to study tomorrow? He asked eventually. I laughed, which came out wrong. I have to be. 27 days. My Aunt Carol's attorney filed the civil complaint the following Friday. Fraud, breach of fiduciary responsibility, unjust enrichment. The amount sought was $72,000 plus legal fees. Simultaneously, she submitted the forensic documents report and a formal complaint to the State Attorney General's office regarding the forged cosignature on the home equity loan, which fell under identity theft statutes as well as federal wire fraud given that the loan had involved interstate banking. My parents were served on a Monday morning. The calls started within the hour. My mother's number, my father's number, Derek's number, a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be Brittany, who had apparently been recruited as a messenger. I blocked them one by one and forwarded everything to my Aunt Carol's attorney, who noted each attempt at contact with professional satisfaction. The social media posts escalated. My mother posted a photo of herself crying. Derek wrote a lengthy statement about how his sister had betrayed the family at the worst possible time, just before his wedding, which he said I had obviously resented from the start. Several people who had been commenting sympathetically on the original posts began asking more pointed questions about what specifically Maya had done, about why the legal complaint mentioned money the parents had received, about what a forensic documents examiner was, and why one would be involved. My Aunt Carol had a friend, a journalist who covered local business news, who she had quietly informed of the situation. He wrote nothing. He didn't need to. But he asked my Aunt Carol for the forensic documents report, looked at it, and mentioned it to 2 of his colleagues in passing. Word travels in a city the size of Savannah. My brother called Noah, who told him calmly that Maya wasn't available and that continuing to contact her was inadvisable given the active legal complaint. Derek told Noah to stay out of family business. Noah said, very politely, that when a family member commits identity theft against someone, it stops being just family business, and hung up. I heard about this secondhand and held Noah's hand for approximately 5 minutes without saying anything. 12 days before my exam, My Aunt Carol called to tell me that my parents wanted a meeting. Do I have to be there? I asked. You don't have to be anywhere you don't want to be, but I think you should be. The meeting was held at my Aunt Carol's hotel suite on a Saturday afternoon because she refused to hold it at my parents' house and I had no desire to have it at mine. I wore a dark blue blazer that I had bought for job interviews and told myself I was not nervous, which was not entirely true, but I was steadier than I expected. My parents arrived looking diminished. My mother had aged in a way that a few weeks should not account for. My father's usual self-assured posture had compressed into something tighter, more careful. Derek was with them, which I had not expected, and Brittany was not. My Aunt Carol's attorney, a woman named Dr. Patricia Osei, sat at the table with 3 folders arranged in front of her. She opened the first one without preamble. Let's begin with what we know, she said, and her voice had the kind of professional evenness that made it clear she had sat in rooms like this many times and would sit in many more, and that the contents of this particular meeting were not going to rattle her in any direction. She laid out the financial history in precise order. The monthly transfers my Aunt Carol had sent, the account they'd entered, the expenses they'd funded. She was not emotional about it. She listed the figures the way someone reads a grocery receipt. My mother said, twice, that the money had always been intended to help the whole family, that my Aunt Carol had known what she was doing, that none of it was fraud. Dr. Osei acknowledged each statement without agreeing with it and moved on. Then she opened the second folder. My parents' attorney, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, shifted in his seat when the forensic documents report appeared on the table. My father's jaw tightened. Derek looked at his hands. This is the preliminary forensic analysis of the signature on the home equity loan co-signature line, Dr. Osei said. The conclusion, which has been reviewed by a second independent examiner, is that the signature is not Maya's. It is a deliberate fabrication using a traced sample of her actual handwriting. That is not my father started. Robert. My Aunt Carol's voice was quiet. Stop. He stopped. It was the first time in my life I had seen my father stop talking when my mother was not the one who told him to. Something about it made my chest ache in a way I didn't have words for. You have 2 options, Dr. Osei continued. She opened the third folder. Option 1. You sign this repayment agreement today. You commit to repaying my client the $72,000 over a structured 10-year schedule, with an initial payment of $5,000 within 30 days. You provide a notarized letter acknowledging that Maya did not co-sign the home equity loan and was unaware of it, which will be used to have her name removed from that liability. You delete every social media post made in the last 3 weeks, and you provide written apologies to both my client and to Maya. You will also agree to a no-contact period with Maya of 1 year, during which all communication goes through counsel. My mother was crying silently. I watched her without feeling the guilt that used to arrive automatically when she cried. Option 2, Dr. Osei said. We proceed to civil trial. The forensic evidence goes to the state attorney general. The criminal identity theft complaint goes forward. The IRS referral, which was filed yesterday morning, proceeds independently. She paused. The home equity loan goes into default review because the co-signer's signature is fraudulent, which calls the entire loan into question and may put the house at risk. Your son is named in the civil suit as a beneficiary of the misdirected funds. Derek looked up sharply. I didn't know. The transfers to the joint account you hold with your parents are documented, Dr. Osei said simply. Whether you knew their origin is something a civil proceeding would determine. The room was quiet for a long moment. If we sign, my father said, and his voice had gone flat, you don't pursue the criminal charges. My client does not pursue them. The Attorney General's office makes its own decisions independently, but my client's active cooperation is something they would note either way. My mother reached out and put her hand over my father's. They looked at each other in the way that people who have been married for 30 years sometimes do, an entire conversation happening in silence. I had seen them look at each other that way my whole life, and for most of my life I had thought it meant they were united in something good. Derek was staring at the table. He looked less like the golden child brother I had resented, and more like a 30-year-old man who had been handed things his whole life and had only just begun to understand what that had cost. We'll sign, my mother said. The actual signing took 45 minutes. The social media posts were deleted while we sat there, my mother going through her phone with shaking hands, my father through his, Derek erasing his statement and the caption on the photo, Dr. Osei's paralegal verified each deletion before marking them confirmed. When it was done, my parents stood to leave. My father walked out without looking at me. Derek paused near the door. "I didn't know about the loan," he said. "I want you to know that. I didn't know." I looked at my brother, at the face I had known my entire life, that had always been looking somewhere more interesting than wherever I was. "I believe you," I said. And I did, mostly. "But you knew where your money was coming from, Derek. You knew things were tight, and you never asked. That's its own thing." He didn't answer. He left. My mother was last. She stood at the door with her purse held in front of her with both hands, and she looked at me with an expression that I couldn't fully read. Too many things in it, grief, and anger, and something that might have been, under other circumstances, something close to recognition. "I did love you," she said. "I want you to know I did." "I know," I said. And that was true too, in its own inadequate way, but loving someone doesn't mean you get to take from them without consequence. She left. The door closed and the room was very quiet. My Aunt Carol sat across from me, and we looked at each other for a moment. "How do you feel?" she asked. "I thought about it honestly. Like I need to pass my boards," I said. She laughed, which was the right response. I studied for the next 12 days with a focus I hadn't been capable of in months. Without the vendor calls and the fabric sample pickups and the constant low-grade anxiety of waiting for the next crisis, I could think. Jordan and I met for 6-hour study sessions every other day. I slept 7 hours a night. I ate meals I actually cooked instead of whatever I grabbed between shifts. On the morning of my exam, Noah drove me to the testing center and did not offer advice or encouragement, which I had specifically asked him not to do because I find it more stressful than helpful. He just drove, and he brought me a coffee from the place on Bull Street that gets it right, and he said, "I'll be right here when you're done." I walked in and sat down and took the exam. It took 4 hours and 11 minutes. I answered every question. Some of them I was certain about. Some of them I made my best clinical judgment and moved on. When I finished and stood up and walked out into the afternoon sunlight, I felt not triumphant but simply very quiet, like something had been set down after a long time of carrying it. My results came in 8 days later. I was on my lunch break, eating at a table near the hospital entrance, when the email arrived. I read it 3 times. Then I called my Aunt Carol. "I passed," I said. The sound she made on the other end of the phone was not what I expected from a composed woman of 58, who ran a consulting firm and handled legal proceedings without visible emotion. It was a genuinely joyful sound, unguarded and immediate. "Of course you did," she said, and she sounded like she was crying a little. That evening, my Aunt Carol drove up from Charleston and took me and Noah to dinner at a restaurant called The Grey, in the old Greyhound bus terminal downtown, the place I had bookmarked 2 years ago when I first started the No Problem program, and told myself I would go the night I passed my boards. I had not told my Aunt Carol this. She had simply asked what restaurant I had been wanting to try, and I had told her, and she had made the reservation without ceremony. We sat at a table near the windows as the Savannah evening went gold and amber outside, and my Aunt Carol ordered a bottle of champagne and said, "To doing it yourself when no one helped you the way they should have." I raised my glass and thought about everything that had been taken from me, and everything I had built anyway, and felt, underneath the exhaustion and the residual grief and the lingering strangeness of a family that no longer called, something that was not complicated at all. Relief. Pure, uncomplicated relief. The first repayment check arrived at my Aunt Carol's attorney's office 3 weeks later. The notarized letter removing my name from the home equity loan followed the week after. My parents' attorney had negotiated that part carefully and efficiently, which told me they had found a lawyer who was doing her job well even for clients she probably had questions about. My brother called me once, 2 months after the meeting. He was brief and awkward and said mostly that he hoped I was doing well, and that Brittany had asked about me. I told him I was doing well, which was true. I told him I wished him luck with the wedding, which was also true, in the distant and genuine way that you can wish luck to someone you have accepted you may not see for a very long time. I didn't ask if the wedding was still happening. I didn't ask where they were living or whether my parents had helped with costs. Some questions don't need answers. The hospital's advanced practice unit offered me a position 2 weeks after I received my license, which I accepted after some negotiation on the salary that I had previously been too afraid to do. Doctor. Osei's assistant called to tell me that the state attorney general's office had reviewed the identity theft complaint and that while they were declining to prosecute at this time, the investigation had been noted in my parents' record, which meant certain things about any future financial activity. I filed that information away and did not spend very much time thinking about it. I found a new apartment, a small one-bedroom near Forsyth Park with tall windows and enough room for a real desk, and I painted one wall a deep green that reminded me of nothing in particular except that I had always wanted to try it. My Aunt Carol came to see the apartment when I finished settling in. She stood in the center of my living room and looked around at the bookshelves I'd organized and the prints I'd finally hung and the desk where my nursing materials sat in orderly stacks. And she said, "You know, when I started sending that money, I genuinely believed it was making your life easier. I know. I should have asked you directly. I should have confirmed. You trusted your sister," I said. "That's not a character flaw." She was quiet for a moment. "You're generous." "I'm practical," I said. "The energy I'd spend being angry at you is energy I need for other things." She looked at me for a moment, then said, with the directness that I had come to recognize as the thing I liked best about her, "You're going to be remarkable at this, Maya. The practice, the license, all of it. I want you to know that I see that." I had been waiting my entire life for someone in my family to say something like that to me. I had expected, when it finally happened, to cry. Instead, I just felt it settle into me like something clicking into place, solid and permanent, not dependent on anyone else repeating it. "Thank you," I said. We had dinner at the kitchen table I'd bought secondhand and refinished myself, and talked for 3 hours about nothing urgent, and when she left, she hugged me at the door, in the matter-of-fact way she had of showing affection, brief and firm and real. I stood on my front step and watched her car pull away, and then went back inside to my apartment, my license framed on the wall above my desk, my life organized exactly the way I wanted it, belonging entirely to me. No one had given it to me. No one had arranged it or funded it, or made it possible through their generosity. I had built it myself. In the end, that was the thing I kept coming back to. Not the money that had been taken from me, not the signature that had been forged, not the years of being the invisible daughter in a house where one child was the whole sun, and one child was expected to orbit quietly and be grateful for the warmth. All of that had happened. All of it was real, but so was this. So was the desk and the green wall and the license and the apartment and the career and the knowledge, in the part of myself where I kept the things I was certain of, that I had never needed them to make me. I had needed them to stop making me smaller. The moment they did, I found out how much space I'd actually been taking up all along.